In the winter of 1581, as Eastern Europe froze under a blanket of snow and blood, two great powers stood locked in one of the most brutal sieges of the time. On one side, the forces of Tsar Ivan IV, better known as Ivan the Terrible, desperately defending the Russian city of Pskov. On the other, the mighty armies of the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, led by King Stephen Bathory, laying siege to the city with the hope of breaking Russia's will. The siege dragged on for months. The cold crept into bones, supplies dwindled to crumbs, and morale crumbled like ancient stone. Soldiers on both sides huddled by dwindling fires, fearing not just death in battle, but starvation, disease, and the slow madness that comes from staring too long into the eyes of death. And then, something changed. Men began to disappear, not from gunfire or swordplay, but during the stillest hours of the night. Bodies were found outside the camps, torn apart in ways no human weapon could have achieved. Throats were ripped open, bones shattered, limbs twisted and dragged through snow. It was as though the forest itself had come alive to consume them. At first, commanders blamed enemy ambushes, perhaps spies or deserters turned savage. But then came the tracks. Massive paw prints in the snow, far too large for any dog or wolf known to the region. What's more, they led deep into the woods and vanished. Panic took root. Soldiers began whispering around fires. They spoke of a creature, a wolf unlike any ever seen, massive, black as night, with glowing eyes and a mind that seemed human. It didn't hunt for hunger, they said. It hunted with purpose, and it chose no side. Russians, Poles, nobles, peasants, all were equal prey. The creature seemed to appear and disappear at will. Patrols were wiped out. Night guards vanished without a trace. Men refused to leave their camps after dark. And in the eerie quiet of those winter nights, both armies began to feel the same thing, a dread far deeper than any war could summon. Rumors spread like wildfire. Some claimed it was a spirit, a demon of the forest, awakened by the violence of men. Others said it was a punishment, nature's vengeance on a world torn apart by greed and blood. But one truth began to take hold across both armies. The war had summoned something it could not defeat. And then, something stranger happened. One cold evening, a group of Russian soldiers, unarmed, approached the enemy line under a white banner. They weren't there to negotiate a surrender, nor to exchange prisoners. They came to ask a question that echoed in both camps. Have you seen it too? And the answer was yes. Polish officers nodded grimly. They too had lost men to the beast. They too had heard the howls echoing through the forest like death's breath. They too had buried bodies that bore wounds no blade could explain. That night, soldiers from both armies sat around fires, separated by allegiance but united by fear. They shared stories of sightings, of narrow escapes, of the horror in the woods. And in that shared terror, something shifted. Hatred faded. Curiosity took its place. Respect even. And then, the war simply stopped. A ceasefire was called within days. Official documents would later attribute it to fatigue, logistics, and diplomatic pressure. But among the men who fought, the truth was different. The war didn't end because of politics. It ended because of the wolf. The day the ceasefire was signed, a final sighting was reported. The creature was seen standing alone between the two armies, still and silent, watching. And then, without sound or struggle, it turned and vanished into the forest. From that moment on, it was never seen again. No more soldiers were attacked. No patrols were lost. The howls stopped echoing. Only silence remained, and snow. For centuries, the story of the Wolf of Pskov has survived in hushed voices. Historians debate whether it was real, an unusually large and territorial wolf, or simply a myth born from exhaustion and trauma. Some believe it was a symbol, a metaphor for the madness of war. Others are convinced it was something else entirely, something older, something wild. But one thing is certain. In the heart of one of the coldest winters in one of Europe's bloodiest centuries, when diplomacy failed and men had forgotten their own humanity, it wasn't a general or a king or a god who ended the violence. It was a wolf,